How many of you remember that terrible noise? Do you remember like having to dial in to AOL? And then if you dialed in, if your parents or your friends or somebody picked up the phone while you were using it, you'd be like, are you serious? I have to start all over again. And if you remember, sometimes you'd be in like the middle of a chat room or downloading something, and downloads at that time would be insane. Like seeing a picture download as it came down the screen and slowly came into focus. That was insane. And so then if somebody picked up the phone, you'd have to start over again. Well, in 1990, something new had just been born. Something called the World Wide Web and the Hypertext Project. Tim Berners-Lee introduced this project, and it's pretty important to the history of digital media and very important to the history of our new media program. The Hypertext Project is about hypertext itself, and hypertext is the idea that text doesn't exist in one space only. It exists everywhere all at once. And what we're looking at is basically Unicode, just basic Unicode, the equivalent of just words or letters somewhere. But when presented on your screen, it's presented in a different font type or a different file type or a different style because it's presented through the hypertext medium. So if you were to type something in basic web, it would look like Times New Roman in black and white with purple links if you clicked on them or blue if you haven't. But then you could use something like style or HTML, hypertext markup language, in order to integrate style into the text. And this way now you can customize the text. It could be bigger when you see it on the screen or smaller, and that is based on how we could communicate via machines through the screens that were connecting them. And this leads to one of the biggest inventions in all of our history, the web browser. The web browser is really a reader for the internet. It's the best thing we have, we still use it today. The web browser is pretty much everything we access the web with. The web browser is the reader. So you would access the World Wide Web by dialing in an IP address, which would be a number at the top, which is usually masked by a domain name. That's the web address itself. So all domain names are really just masks for a series of numbers. That's what's called a domain mask. And then it would lead you to the server and bring it back. And it would retrieve the website, bring it to your site through the browser interface. And that browser interface is clickable via mouse or whatever, and then you could actually operate the World Wide Web. So the first browser was born in 1993. It was called the Mosaic browser. It predates everything else. The Mosaic browser becomes Netscape, which you might know. Some of you may have used. At that point, something very interesting begins. Around the time of the first browser, 1993 and 1994, the digital wars begin. And so the digital wars are the browser wars, which you're about to see you don't have to watch it all, but a fairly dated video about what those wars were like, and it's still a pretty good resource. The console wars, which if you're interested in that, Blake Harris has a book called Console Wars, which talks about PlayStation's innovation and intervention and interruption into Nintendo and our mainstays of big consoles that you're used to in gaming, and now PlayStation shows up, and there's a whole series of consoles out there that are trying to intervene in how we play games. And actual wars. And what I mean by that is the invention of GPS is invented in 1995, as well as the invention of the Predator drone. And so these two things co-align with what we have today, where we are actually in the midst of a drone war in the Middle East and other places, where we send GPS-guided unmanned vehicles. This is just a little over 20 years ago, and we've started these different types of technological wars that we're in right now. So the browser wars is really one of the first ways of understanding how corporatism kind of affects things. So I do think that you should take a little break and just see a little bit of the browser wars.